Sarah Martinez clutched the steering wheel tighter as rain pelted her windshield. Her hands trembled not from the cold October night, but from the fresh bruises on her wrists where Marcus had grabbed her during their final confrontation. The headlights of her beat-up Honda barely cut through the darkness as she navigated the winding mountain road, checking her rearview mirror every few seconds. She had finally done it. After 2 years of psychological torture and escalating violence, she had escaped. The cabin appeared through the trees like a ghost from her childhood. Her grandmother's old hunting lodge had been abandoned for nearly a decade, sitting forgotten on 40 acres of dense woodland. Sarah remembered spending summers here as a child, feeling safe and loved. Now, at 28, she desperately needed that same sanctuary. The spare key was still hidden under the third loose stone by the porch steps, just as Grandma Rose had always kept it. Inside, the cabin smelled of dust and old wood. Sarah fumbled for the light switch, relieved when the electricity still worked. The main room was exactly as she remembered it. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, surrounded by faded furniture covered in white sheets. Cobwebs decorated the corners like nature's own curtains. She dropped her single duffel bag and sank into her grandmother's old rocking chair, finally allowing herself to cry. Marcus had been charming at first. The successful lawyer with his expensive suits and confident smile had swept her off her feet during her final year of nursing school. But charm had gradually given way to control. First, he convinced her to quit her job at the hospital, claiming he earned enough to support them both. Then came the isolation from friends and family, the constant criticism disguised as concern, and finally the violence that started with a slap and escalated to something much worse. The breaking point came 3 days ago when she found the hidden camera in their bedroom. Marcus had been recording everything, keeping files on her every movement, every conversation. When she confronted him, his mask completely slipped. The man she thought she loved revealed himself to be a dangerous predator who saw her as property to be controlled. That night, while he slept off another drinking binge, she grabbed what little money she had saved and ran. Sarah explored the cabin with a flashlight, checking that all doors and windows were secure. The landline phone was dead, and her cell phone showed no signal. Perfect. She wanted to disappear completely, at least until she could figure out her next move. The cabin was isolated enough that Marcus would never think to look for her here. He didn't even know her grandmother had owned this place. In the kitchen, she found some old canned goods and a manual can opener. The cupboards held basic supplies that would last a few days if she was careful. The bedroom at the back of the cabin had a clear view of the access road through the trees. She would hear any car approaching long before it reached the cabin. For the first time in months, Sarah felt like she could breathe freely. As she settled in for the night, Sarah made herself a simple meal and sat by the fireplace. The flames danced hypnotically, bringing back memories of her grandmother telling stories in this very room. Rose had been a strong woman who had raised 3 children alone after her husband died in Vietnam. She would have been proud of Sarah for finally finding the courage to leave. The rain continued to pound the roof, creating a rhythmic lullaby that gradually eased Sarah's nerves. She had brought her nursing textbooks, hoping to study for her upcoming certification exam. Maybe she could still salvage her career and build a new life somewhere far from Marcus and his influence. For now, though, she just needed time to heal and plan. Sarah double-checked the door locks one more time before heading to bed. The cabin felt secure, wrapped in darkness and surrounded by miles of empty forest. Tomorrow, she would start thinking about practical things like finding a lawyer and maybe contacting the domestic violence shelter in the nearest town. Tonight, she just wanted to sleep without fear for the first time in years. As she drifted off in her grandmother's old bed, Sarah clutched the small can of pepper spray she had bought weeks ago. It wasn't much protection, but it made her feel slightly safer. Outside, the storm raged on, masking any sounds from the forest. She had no way of knowing that her presence at the cabin had already been noticed by someone who made Marcus look like a harmless amateur. The peaceful sanctuary she thought she had found was about to become the center of a much more dangerous game. Sarah woke to the sound of a car engine cutting through the morning silence. Her blood turned to ice as she scrambled to the bedroom window, expecting to see Marcus's black BMW crawling up the dirt road. Instead, a sleek silver Mercedes sedan emerged from the tree line, moving with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where they were going. The car was expensive, pristine, and completely out of place in this wilderness setting. Through the trees, she watched a man step out of the vehicle. He was tall and imposing, wearing a perfectly tailored dark suit despite being in the middle of nowhere. Even from a distance, Sarah could sense an aura of danger around him that made her skin crawl. This wasn't Marcus, but somehow that realization didn't bring relief. Something about this stranger's presence felt far more threatening than her abusive ex-boyfriend ever had. The man surveyed the cabin with calculating eyes, his gaze methodical and professional. He moved like a predator, each step deliberate and controlled. Sarah pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering so loudly she was sure he could hear it from outside. She had chosen this place specifically because it was isolated and unknown. How could anyone have found her here? A firm knock echoed through the cabin, 3 measured raps that somehow managed to sound both polite and menacing. Sarah held her breath, hoping he would assume the place was empty and leave. Instead, his deep voice carried clearly through the wooden door, speaking with a slight accent she couldn't quite place. "I know you're inside. We need to talk. I'm not here to hurt you, but I do need you to open the door." There was something in his tone that suggested he was used to being obeyed without question. Sarah's nursing training kicked in, and she tried to assess the situation rationally. She was trapped in a remote location with no phone service and no neighbors for miles. Running would be pointless in the dense forest, especially against someone who clearly knew the area well enough to find this hidden cabin. "I'm armed," she called out, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. "And I've called the police." A low chuckle drifted through the door. "No, you haven't. There's no cell service for 15 miles, and I disabled the landline connection yesterday. As for being armed, that pepper spray isn't going to help you much." Sarah's blood chilled. How did he know about the pepper spray? Had he been watching her? The realization that she had been under surveillance without knowing it made her feel sick. She had thought she was finally safe, finally hidden, but apparently she had been wrong about everything. "Look," the man continued, his voice surprisingly reasonable, "my name is Vincent Romano. I own this property now, bought it from the county 6 months ago when the taxes went unpaid. I'm not here to evict you, and I'm certainly not here to hurt a woman who's clearly running from trouble. But we do need to discuss your situation." Sarah's mind reeled. The county had sold her grandmother's property? That was impossible. She had been paying the taxes through an automatic bank transfer for years after Rose died, unless ... Marcus. He had access to all her financial accounts. If he had discovered this place, he could have easily stopped the tax payments and bought the property himself through a shell company. But this, Vincent Romano didn't sound like he was working for Marcus. There was an authority in his voice that suggested he answered to no one. Sarah had heard enough crime documentaries to recognize the signs. This man was connected to something much more serious than domestic abuse. The expensive car, the tailored suit, the way he spoke as if he owned the world, everything pointed to organized crime. "I don't understand," Sarah said through the door. "This property has been in my family for generations, and there must be some mistake." "There's no mistake. But like I said, I'm not here to kick you out. Actually, your presence here creates an interesting opportunity. You see, I've been having some problems with the local law enforcement lately. Having an innocent civilian staying at my cabin could provide excellent ... cover." The way he said cover made Sarah's stomach drop. She was being offered a deal by someone who clearly lived in a world where violence was a business tool. But what choice did she have? She was alone, isolated, and apparently trapped on property owned by what was likely a dangerous criminal. "What kind of problems?" she asked, surprised by her own boldness. "The kind that involve people asking too many questions about my activities in this area. Having a domestic violence victim hiding out here would explain any unusual activity. Plus, I could use someone with medical training on standby." "I understand you're a nurse?" Sarah's blood went cold. He knew about her profession, which meant he had been investigating her. But how much did he know? Did he know about Marcus? About why she was really here? The situation was spiraling far beyond anything she could have imagined. When she fled to what she thought was a safe haven, through the window, she watched Vincent Romano check his expensive watch with the casual patience of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. He wasn't going away, and she was running out of options. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had escaped one dangerous man only to find herself at the mercy of someone who was probably infinitely more dangerous. "I'll make you a deal," Vincent called out. "You help me, and I'll help you. I can make your ex-boyfriend disappear permanently if that's what you want. But first, you need to open this door. We have business to discuss." Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for the door lock. Every instinct screamed at her to keep the barrier between herself and this dangerous stranger, but Vincent Romano had made it clear that the choice was an illusion. She was trapped on his property with nowhere to run, and his offer to deal with Marcus permanently was both terrifying and tempting in ways that scared her about herself when she finally opened the door. Vincent Romano was even more intimidating up close. He stood well over 6 feet tall with dark hair graying at the temples and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. His expensive suit was immaculate despite the remote location, and a thin scar ran along his left jaw, giving him a predatory appearance that no amount of polish could hide. But what struck Sarah most was his stillness. He moved with the controlled precision of someone who had learned to contain violence rather than eliminate it. "Thank you," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. His gaze swept the cabin's interior with professional efficiency, noting the emergency bag by the door and the way Sarah positioned herself near potential escape routes. "You're smart to be cautious. That survival instinct will serve you well in our arrangement." Sarah backed toward the kitchen, keeping distance between them. "What arrangement? I haven't agreed to anything." Vincent smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You agreed the moment you opened the door. But let me explain what you're getting into, since I prefer willing cooperation to forced compliance." He moved to the window and glanced toward his car. "I run certain business operations in this area that require discretion. Recently, the FBI has been asking uncomfortable questions about activities around this mountain. Your presence here as a domestic violence victim provides perfect cover for any unusual traffic. What kind of business?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew. "The kind that keeps certain products moving across state lines without unnecessary government interference." Vincent's tone was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather. "Nothing that would put you in direct legal jeopardy. Assuming you follow instructions and ask no questions about visitors who might occasionally need to use this location." Sarah felt like Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole. 24 hours ago, her biggest worry was staying hidden from an abusive ex-boyfriend. Now she was being recruited as cover for what sounded like major criminal operations. "And if I refuse?" Vincent studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Then you'll need to find somewhere else to hide. Unfortunately, I'll have to inform certain parties about your location first, just to ensure my own security. Your ex-boyfriend isn't the only person who might be interested in finding you." The implied threat hit Sarah like a physical blow. Vincent had connections that could track her anywhere she went. Refusing his offer wouldn't just mean losing her sanctuary. It would mean being completely exposed to Marcus and possibly worse. She was caught between two different types of predator, and Vincent held all the power. "What exactly would I have to do?" she asked, hating how small her voice sounded. "Mostly just be yourself. When authorities come asking questions, you're a nurse recovering from domestic abuse who's staying here temporarily. If anyone approaches the cabin unexpectedly, you call me immediately." He pulled out an expensive satellite phone and placed it on the table. "This works everywhere on the mountain. If federal agents show up, you're a helpless victim who knows nothing about any criminal activity." Sarah stared at the phone like it was a snake, accepting it would make her complicit in whatever Vincent was involved in. But the alternative was returning to the nightmare world Marcus had created for her, except now he would be furious about her escape attempt. Vincent seemed to read her internal struggle with disturbing accuracy. Your ex-boyfriend is a lawyer, correct? Marcus Hendricks of Hendricks and Associates? Vincent's casual use of Marcus's full name made Sarah's knees weak. I've done some research. He has connections to several judges and police officials. If he wants to find you through official channels, he probably can. But those same officials won't interfere with my business if they know what's good for them. The message was clear. Vincent's protection might be Sarah's only real option for staying hidden. Marcus had legal and professional networks, but Vincent operated in a world where those connections meant nothing. It was a devil's bargain, but possibly her only chance at freedom. You said you could make Marcus disappear permanently, Sarah said, surprising herself with the question. What did you mean? Vincent's smile turned genuinely amused. Direct, I like that. Yes, I could solve your problem with extreme prejudice. But that would be wasteful. A missing lawyer draws attention. A lawyer who suddenly develops gambling debts and flees the country to avoid prosecution is much cleaner. The casual way he discussed destroying someone's life should have horrified Sarah. Instead, she felt a dark satisfaction at the thought of Marcus getting exactly what he deserved. 2 years of psychological torture and physical abuse had left its mark on her sense of justice. Maybe working with Vincent wasn't just about survival, maybe it was about finally having the power to fight back. There's something else, Vincent continued, watching her face carefully. You're a nurse. I occasionally have associates who require medical attention, but can't visit hospitals without triggering uncomfortable questions. Nothing major: gunshot wounds, stab injuries, that sort of thing. Patch them up, ask no questions, remember nothing afterward. Sarah's stomach dropped. He was asking her to become an accomplice to violent crimes, to use her medical training to help criminals escape justice. But the alternative was returning to Marcus and his escalating abuse, probably ending up as another domestic violence statistic. At least Vincent was being honest about what he expected from her. I'll need time to think about this, she said. Of course. Take all the time you need. Vincent headed toward the door, then paused. But while you're thinking, remember that your ex-boyfriend probably discovered your car missing hours ago. He'll be looking for you soon, and he has resources. I'm offering you protection from someone who might actually be able to provide it. As Vincent's Mercedes disappeared back into the trees, Sarah sank into her grandmother's rocking chair and tried to process what had just happened. She had fled one prison only to find herself facing a choice between different types of captivity. But for the first time since leaving Marcus, she felt like she might actually have some control over her fate, even if it meant making deals with the devil himself. 3 days passed in tense silence before the satellite phone rang for the first time. Sarah stared at the device, knowing that answering it would cross a line she could never uncross. But the alternative was waiting helplessly for Marcus to track her down, and Vincent's research had already proven that nowhere was truly safe from her ex-boyfriend's connections. There's a situation. Vincent's voice was calm but urgent when she finally picked up. I need you to prepare for a patient. GSW to the abdomen, stable but needs immediate attention. They'll arrive in 20 minutes. Sarah's nursing training kicked in automatically. Gunshot wound to the abdomen could mean internal bleeding, damaged organs. I'll need more supplies than what's here. This isn't a sterile environment for surgery. You're not performing surgery, just stabilizing until we can move him. There's a medical kit hidden under the floorboards beneath the kitchen table. Everything you need should be there. Vincent paused. Sarah, this person saved my daughter's life last week. Whatever you think about my business, this is about helping someone who deserves to live. The personal detail caught Sarah off guard. Vincent had a daughter, which meant somewhere beneath his criminal exterior was a father who understood love and protection. It didn't excuse what he did, but it made him human in a way that complicated her feelings about their arrangement. Under the kitchen table, Sarah found a hidden compartment containing medical supplies that would make most emergency rooms envious. Sterile instruments, medications, blood products. Vincent had clearly planned for situations like this. The professional quality of the equipment told her this wasn't his first time. Harboring injured criminals. 20 minutes later, Two men carried an unconscious patient through the cabin door. The injured man was young, maybe early 30s, with dark skin and wearing clothes that had once been expensive but were now soaked in blood. One of his escorts was a massive man with prison tattoos covering his forearms. The other was smaller but moved with the same dangerous grace she had noticed in Vincent. "He's lost a lot of blood," the smaller man reported. "Got shot during a deal that went wrong. Bullets still inside." Sarah immediately switched into nurse mode, pushing aside questions about how this man had been shot or why they couldn't take him to a hospital. Her patient was going into shock, and nothing else mattered right now. She checked his pulse and blood pressure while cutting away his shirt to examine the wound. "The bullet missed the major arteries, but there's internal bleeding," she announced. "I can stabilize him, but he needs surgery soon or he'll die." "Why can't you take him to a hospital?" The two men exchanged glances before the larger one answered. "He's got warrants." "Hospital means police, police means prison." "Vincent said you'd understand about needing to stay hidden." Sarah did understand, more than she cared to admit. She started in 4-line and administered pain medication while cleaning the wound. The man stirred briefly, his eyes focusing on her face with surprising gentleness for someone involved in Vincent's world. "Angel," he whispered before slipping back into unconsciousness, working to save the stranger's life. Sarah felt more useful than she had in years. Marcus had convinced her that her nursing skills were worthless, that she was lucky he supported her financially. Now she was literally the difference between life and death for someone who had no other options. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was finding her strength again while hiding from the man who had tried to destroy it. 2 hours later, the patient was stable enough to be moved to what the men called a safe house with better medical facilities. Before they left, the smaller man handed Sarah an envelope containing more cash than she had ever seen at once. "Vincent's bonus for good work," he explained. "He'll be in touch soon." Alone again in the cabin, Sarah stared at the money spread across the kitchen table. It was enough to start over anywhere she wanted, to disappear completely and build a new life. But she knew it came with invisible strings attached. Vincent now had proof that she was willing to help his people. Making her complicit in whatever crimes had led to that shooting, the satellite phone rang again as she was cleaning up the medical supplies. This time, Vincent's tone was warmer, almost proud. "I hear you did excellent work. Diego is going to make a full recovery thanks to you." "Diego saved your daughter?" Sarah asked, remembering Vincent's earlier comment. "A rival family took her to force my cooperation with their expansion into my territory. Diego got her out, took a bullet in the process. Whatever you think about the life we lead, we take care of our own. You helped me take care of someone who matters." For the first time, Sarah heard genuine emotion in Vincent's voice. His gratitude was real, which made their relationship even more complicated. She wasn't just helping nameless criminals, she was saving people who mattered to someone who was beginning to matter to her, despite every logical reason to fear him. "There's news about your ex-boyfriend," Vincent continued. "He's been asking questions around town, showing your picture to hotel clerks and gas station attendants. He's getting closer. But I have a plan to deal with that problem permanently." Sarah's stomach clenched. "What kind of plan?" "The kind that ensures he never hurts you or anyone else again. Marcus has enemies he doesn't know about, judges he's bribed, cases he's fixed. I can expose all of it, destroy his career and reputation. Or I can handle it more directly if you prefer." The offer hung in the air between them. Vincent was giving her the choice of how to deal with Marcus, from professional destruction to something much more final. Either way, he was offering her freedom from the man who had terrorized her for years. All it would cost was her complete loyalty to a world she had never wanted to enter. "I need time to think," Sarah said, though she already knew what her answer would be. "Of course. But Sarah?" Vincent's voice carried a warning. "Marcus hired a private investigator yesterday. Professional trackers are harder to avoid than angry ex-boyfriends. Whatever you decide, decide quickly." As Sarah hung up the phone, she realized that saving Diego's life had changed everything. She was no longer just hiding at Vincent's cabin, she was becoming part of his world. And despite the danger, part of her was beginning to like the feeling of having power instead of being powerless. Sarah was cleaning medical instruments when she heard the second car engine approaching the cabin. But this sound was different, angry, aggressive, and familiar in the worst possible way. Through the bedroom window, she watched Marcus's black BMW barrel up the dirt road, followed closely by a beat-up pickup truck carrying two men she didn't recognize. Her blood turned to ice as she realized her worst nightmare had finally caught up with her. Marcus burst out of his car, his expensive suit wrinkled and his usually perfect hair disheveled. Even from a distance, Sarah could see the rage radiating from him like heat waves. The two men from the pickup looked like hired muscle, thick-necked and dangerous, in a crude way that made Vincent's controlled menace seem almost elegant by comparison. "Sarah! I know you're in there." Marcus's voice carried across the clearing, sharp with fury and something that might have been desperation. "You think you can just run away from me? You think you can embarrass me like this?" Sarah grabbed the satellite phone with shaking hands, but before she could dial, Marcus kicked in the front door with violent force. The cheap lock splintered, and suddenly he was standing in her grandmother's living room like a demon from her nightmares. The familiar smell of his cologne mixed with alcohol made her stomach clench with remembered fear. "There's my missing fiancé," Marcus said, his voice carrying the false calm that always preceded his worst violence. "You've caused me a lot of trouble, Sarah, a lot of embarrassment. People are asking questions about where my woman went. That reflects poorly on my ability to control my own household." The two men flanked Marcus, blocking the exits. Sarah pressed herself against the far wall, clutching a scalpel from the medical kit behind her back. After days of feeling strong and useful helping Vincent's people, she was suddenly the terrified victim again, shrinking under Marcus's predatory gaze. "You hired investigators to track me down," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "That's called stalking. It's illegal." Marcus laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. "Illegal? I'm a lawyer, sweetheart. I know exactly what's legal and what isn't. And tracking down my mentally unstable fiancé who stole my car and credit cards is perfectly legitimate. These gentlemen are here to help escort you home safely." The lie was so smooth, so believable, that Sarah almost doubted her own memories for a moment. Marcus had always been skilled at twisting reality, at making his abuse seem like concern and his control seem like love. But 2 years of psychological manipulation had finally taught her to recognize his tactics. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she said, her voice growing stronger. "We're done, Marcus. I'm done being your victim." The transformation in Marcus's face was terrifying. His mask of civilized concern dropped completely, revealing the monster underneath. He lunged toward her with vicious intent, but before he could reach her, the sound of another car engine filled the clearing through the broken doorway. Vincent Romano appeared like an avenging angel in an expensive suit. He moved with deadly purpose, and Sarah had never been so happy to see anyone in her entire life. Behind him came Diego, the man she had saved just days earlier, along with 3 other men who looked like they could handle themselves in any kind of fight. Marcus stopped mid-stride, his lawyer's instincts recognizing a shift in power dynamics. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, though some of his arrogance had already evaporated. "I'm the owner of this property," Vincent replied calmly, his accent more pronounced when he was angry. "And you're trespassing. More importantly, you're threatening someone under my protection." The 2 hired muscle types looked nervous, clearly recognizing that they were outclassed. Vincent's men moved with military precision, positioning themselves strategically around the room. Marcus, however, was too drunk on rage and entitlement to back down. "This is between me and my fiancé," Marcus snarled. "This woman belongs to me. She stole my property and ran away like a child having a tantrum. I'm here to bring her home." Vincent's smile was arctic. "She belongs to you? How interesting. Diego, what do we do with men who think they own women?" "In my neighborhood," Diego said, cracking his knuckles, "we teach them better manners." Sarah watched in fascination as Marcus realized he was completely out of his depth. His hired help was already backing toward the door, unwilling to face Vincent's people for whatever Marcus was paying them. For the first time in their relationship, Marcus was the powerless one, and Sarah felt a dark satisfaction watching him squirm. "Look, I don't want any trouble," Marcus said, his voice losing its commanding edge. "I just want my fiancée back. We can discuss compensation for any inconvenience." "Compensation?" Vincent's voice turned deadly quiet. "You think this is about money? You terrorized this woman for years. You made her afraid to sleep peacefully. You made her believe she was worthless." He stepped closer to Marcus, who actually backed away. "That requires a different kind of compensation." Sarah found herself moving forward, no longer hiding behind the wall. "Marcus, I saved a man's life this week. A good man who risked everything to protect an innocent child. You spent 2 years trying to destroy my life, making me believe I was weak and useless. But I'm not. I'm stronger than you ever were." "Sarah, be reasonable," Marcus started, but Vincent cut him off. "She is being reasonable. You're the one who brought armed men to threaten a domestic violence victim on my property." Vincent nodded to his people. "Escort Mr. Hendricks and his friends off my land. Make sure they understand that any future visits will be considered hostile acts." As Marcus was forcibly removed from the cabin, he shouted threats about lawyers and police connections. But his voice carried desperation now instead of authority. Vincent's people bundled him and his hired help into their vehicles with professional efficiency, making it clear that any resistance would be met with overwhelming force. When the sound of Marcus's car faded into the distance, Sarah finally allowed herself to breathe. Vincent approached her carefully as if she might bolt at any sudden movement. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his concern seeming genuine. "No," Sarah said, then corrected herself. "Not anymore." "Good, because we need to talk about making sure he never comes back." 2 weeks after Marcus's forced removal from the cabin, Sarah sat on the porch watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold and crimson. In her hands was a newspaper article that Vincent had delivered that morning. The headline read, "Prominent Attorney Arrested in Bribery Scandal." Marcus's photograph stared back at her from beneath the damning words, his arrogant smile frozen in newsprint. Vincent had been thorough. Marcus wasn't just facing criminal charges for bribing judges and fixing cases. His law license was suspended, his assets frozen, and his reputation destroyed beyond repair. Even if he somehow avoided prison time, he would never again have the power or connections to hurt anyone. Sarah felt a profound sense of closure reading about his downfall. "Justice has many forms," Vincent said, joining her on the porch with 2 cups of coffee. "Sometimes the legal system actually works." Over the past 2 weeks, their relationship had evolved into something Sarah never could have imagined. Vincent still ran his criminal enterprises, but he had also become her protector, her employer, and surprisingly, her friend. She had treated 3 more of his injured associates, each case reinforcing her value to his organization and her growing comfort with moral ambiguity. "There's something I need to tell you," Vincent said, settling into the chair beside her. "The cabin isn't the only property I own up here. I've been developing a legitimate business, a private medical clinic for people who need discretionary health care. Rich clients who want plastic surgery without publicity, politicians who need addiction treatment off the record, that sort of thing." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Legal patients for once?" "Completely legal." "Well, mostly legal." Vincent's smile was almost boyish. "I want you to run it. Full nursing supervisor position, excellent salary, complete autonomy over medical decisions. You'd still help my people when needed, but you'd also have legitimate work that uses your skills properly." The offer was more than Sarah had dared to hope for. A real job using her nursing degree, financial independence, and the protection of Vincent's organization. It was a chance to build something positive from the ashes of her old life. But there was something else in Vincent's expression, something that suggested his interest in her went beyond her professional skills. "There's more," Vincent continued. "My daughter Maria wants to meet you. She's heard about the nurse who's been helping our family, and she wants to thank you personally. She's studying to be a doctor at Columbia." I think you two would have a lot in common. The idea of meeting Vincent's daughter both thrilled and terrified Sarah. Maria represented Vincent's human side. The part of him that was a loving father rather than a dangerous criminal. If Sarah was going to build a life in this morally complex world, she needed to understand all aspects of the man who now controlled her fate. What about the FBI investigation you mentioned? Sarah asked. Won't a medical clinic bring unwanted attention? Actually, it provides perfect cover. Federal agents see a legitimate business run by a domestic violence survivor who's grateful for my help getting back on her feet. Very heartwarming story, really. Vincent's tactical mind was always working, always planning 3 moves ahead. Plus, having you as the public face of the operation adds respectability. You're clean, educated, sympathetic, everything I'm not. Sarah laughed despite herself. You're using me as window dressing for money laundering? I prefer to think of it as giving you a platform to help people while helping myself. Everyone wins. Vincent's expression grew serious. Sarah, I know this isn't the life you planned. But you're good at this work, and you're stronger than you ever believed when you were with that lawyer. You could disappear tomorrow with enough money to start over anywhere, and I wouldn't stop you. But I hope you'll stay. The honesty in his voice caught Sarah off guard. Vincent was offering her a real choice, not the illusion of choice that Marcus had always provided. She could walk away from this world of moral compromise and criminal connections. But she could also stay and build something meaningful from the chaos that had brought them together. Diego stopped by yesterday while you were in town, Sarah said. He brought flowers and asked me to teach his sister some basic first aid. Apparently, word is spreading that Vincent Romano's nurse actually cares about her patients. Does that surprise you? Vincent asked. What surprises me is that I care about them too. Sarah folded the newspaper, symbolically closing the chapter of her life that had been dominated by Marcus's abuse. I never expected to find family among criminals, but that's what's happening here. These people look out for each other in ways that so-called respectable society never did. Vincent reached over and took her hand, his touch gentle despite the calluses that spoke of a violent past. Family is what we make it, not what society tells us it should be. You saved Diego's life, which means you saved a piece of my daughter's heart. That makes you family. As the sun climbed higher, Sarah felt the last of her old fears dissolving. Marcus's power over her was broken forever. Destroyed by a man who understood violence but chose to use it protectively rather than destructively. Vincent's world was dangerous and morally complicated, but it was also filled with loyalty, respect, and genuine care for the people within its borders. I'll take the job, Sarah said finally. But I have one condition, name it. When your daughter visits, I want to cook dinner for all of us. A real family meal in my grandmother's cabin. She would have liked that, her kitchen being used to bring people together instead of hiding them. Vincent's smile transformed his entire face, making him look younger and less dangerous. Rose would be proud of what you've become. Sarah, you found your strength in the most unlikely place with the most unlikely people. That takes courage that can't be taught. As they sat together on the porch, planning Sarah's new clinic and discussing Vincent's daughter's upcoming visit, Sarah realized that sometimes salvation comes from unexpected sources. She had fled to this cabin seeking escape from one man's cruelty and instead found protection from another man's complex version of honor. It wasn't the fairy tale ending she might have dreamed of as a young woman. But it was real, and it was hers, for the first time in years. Sarah Martinez was exactly where she belonged, surrounded by people who valued her strength instead of trying to destroy it. The abandoned cabin had become a home, the dangerous stranger had become family, and the terrified victim had become a woman powerful enough to save lives and build her own destiny. Sometimes the best endings are the ones that look nothing like what you expected but feel exactly like what you needed.